I was a bleeding heart liberal like all of you. I mean, blue hair and everything.
They're so out of step. They're so out of sync with the American people.
How is her fighting for illegals fighting for my civil rights?
This kind of violent rhetoric comes almost entirely from the left.
Did you vote for the Department of Education to be taken out?
Oh, yes, I voted for this.
My name is Tempest.
Are you intimidated? Are you scared? Hey guys, it's Angela, and today we have political activist Mark Meckler joining us today. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. It's good to be with you.
Fantastic. In this video, we are going to be talking about Democrats leaving the Democrat Party, as well as illegal immigration, the Doge Rebellion, taxes, and so much more. Are you ready?
And there's so much going on. Let's dig in.
I know. Make sure you guys are subscribed. Let's get into it. So there is a movement right now where people are putting hashtag walk away from the Democrat Party. So let's hear what this girl has to say.
The reason I am so critical of the Democratic Party right now is because I literally just left it, just like a lot of other people. I was a bleeding heart liberal like all of you. I mean, blue hair and everything. I mean, believe me, I have plenty of pictures proving that I was all in. If you would have asked me a year ago, I would have said there is no way in hell I will ever vote for Donald Trump. But let me tell you what changed my mind. The big moment for me was when the left started trying to push this like Nazi, Hitler, fascism narrative that they're trying to push right now. Like what y'all actually did is made a lot of us really go research Trump even harder. And we started to realize that a lot of things that you guys had shown us about Trump and things that he had said were taken way out of context. A lot of us started noticing.
It seems like a lot of what the Democrats are doing is backfiring.
Yeah, this girl's super interesting to me. I'm older, obviously. I'm 63 years old, but I do speak on campuses. I do talk to a lot of young people. And one of the things I try to say to older people like me is don't despair. A lot of smart young people out there, they may be ignorant. They may not have heard the stuff that you and I have heard. And so they think things because they've only heard one side. But if they see the other side, they're smart enough, they get it. And this girl's a perfect example. She'd probably heard one thing her whole life. Her friends said one thing, maybe her teachers or professors said one thing. And suddenly she heard stuff that just didn't square for her. So she goes out, she does a little bit of research and realizes, hey, I've been lied to for a long time. I want to add one more thing, which is there's a sportscaster on ESPN by the name of Stephen A. Smith. And I listened to Stephen A. talk this week, and he was yelling at Democrats and saying, y'all got to quit lying to us and making people like Sean Hannity look good and look like they're right. And so I think that's what's happening. A lot of people are just starting to see the lie and it peels back and they can't see the lie anymore. They can only see the truth.
It's almost like they're revealing that because, like she is saying, they've been taking it way too far. And in my opinion, their behavior has just been so out of line, so uncalled for. Like the way that they acted at the joint address was just absolutely absurd, that I think it's making people really question the party of the Democrats.
Yeah, there's another major commentator on CNN. His name's Van Jones, and he's about as far left as they get. He's honest. I appreciate that. And this week, somebody asked him a question like, hey, can we talk a little bit about where the Democratic Party's at? He said, I really don't want to talk about this. It's so bad. I don't even know what to say. They're so out of step. They're so out of sync with the American people. It's just an absolute disaster. And I agree with that. And I think this is what you're seeing in girls like this young girl. It's so bad. They're so out of step. Another great example is just the whole trans thing and trans athletes competing men against women. The average person just says, no, that's ridiculous. I imagine this young woman would look at that and say, that's just not fair. Gavin Newsom this week, the crazy governor of California, said that's not fair. And so I think this break with reality is becoming apparent. And you have young women like this who had blue hair. By the way, when I was her age, I had a blue mohawk. So, I can feel her pain.
Wow.
They're just starting to see reality. And it's a good thing for America.
It's funny that you say that because I'm also thinking about The View and just how unattached from reality they are and how they will continuously fight for men to be able to compete in women's sports. Did you see that clip?
I did, yeah, and that's crazy. I saw this week they had Dylan Mulvaney on the show, which is absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. I mean, Dylan Mulvaney is one of maybe the singular figure out of step with American culture. He cost the Bud Light brand billions of dollars in stock value. I mean, that is the worst marketing scheme in American history, the most costly, devastating marketing scheme in American history. The fact that The View would even have Dylan Mulvaney on the show, and I got to say on a personal level, every time I see Dylan Mulvaney, I throw up a little bit in my mouth. It's like just so disgusting. This guy pretending to be a woman. And by the way, if you're a woman and you're watching this and you watch Dylan Mulvaney, you should be insulted. He's actually wearing woman face, making a mockery of what it means to be a woman. It's really outrageous.
Yes, it is. It's crazy. I mean, he has this whole series of days of girlhood. It's just wild. But this is the reason why people are walking away. Here is another example of a girl who put the hashtag walk away from the Democrats.
There are actually people in my comments telling me that Jasmine Crockett is fighting for my civil rights. Bitch, I am an American. How is her fighting for illegals fighting for my civil rights? How is her voting for transgenders to play in women's sports fighting for my civil rights? Are y'all delusional? How is a woman that hates the country that our ancestors built through slavery fighting for my civil rights? She's fighting hard to destroy this country that my ancestors built for free. And you mean to tell me she's fighting for my civil rights? I don't think so, baby. And Booker T. Washington was so fucking right, and I hated to hear him say that when he said what he said about black people voting and black people being involved in politics. I have never saw fight so hard, a group fight so hard for the economic decline of the country that was built by my ancestors for free.
What do you think about what she's saying?
Man, I love it. And it's almost like an improper obsession of mine to watch these videos. And I do, I sort of scroll through them almost every day because they bring me joy, because you see people waking up and you see people, you can look at her and you could say, well, there's a bunch of people on the left that are going to say, well, she has to vote Democrat. She has to be liberal. They put her in a box because she's a Black American. And when I see people break out of that mold, it makes me really happy. They're independent thinkers. And if you're an independent thinker, ultimately you're going to move to the right. And I'm not saying you're going to be a right winger. I'm just saying that ultimately reality is conservative to some extent. And so people who have their eyes open are going to see reality. And I love her going after Jasmine Crockett, who I got to say is one of the dumbest, most offensive people in Congress. And that's a really low bar, but she manages to get underneath that bar.
Yeah, continuously. And I just saw that AOC posted a video on her story of little stick figures of Jasmine Crockett and AOC beating up a Republican. Did you see that?
I didn't see that, but look, this is a dangerous thing. And that's a cute little stick figure thing. I get that. But right now we have leftists, and I would argue Democrats, we don't know for sure yet, but leftist Democrats setting Tesla dealerships on fire, bashing in the windows of Teslas. Yeah. We've had incredible leftist violence in this country over the last few years. It gets memory hold, but you have the Republican baseball shooting, Steve Scalise almost killed. He's still watched because of what happened to him. We've got the assassination attempts on Donald Trump. This kind of violent rhetoric comes almost entirely from the left. And I think one of the things that your viewers should note is if you look at the movements of the left, socialist, progressive movements of the left over history, 100% of the time they end in violence. They start off with good intentions, like we just want everybody to have healthcare or whatever. Wow. We want everybody to stop smoking, and then they prohibit it, then they make it criminal, then they throw you in jail, and then they kill you if they don't like what you do. And that's what we're seeing on the left in this country right now. And so AOC putting out a cartoon like that when she should be telling people to chill out and stop being violent, stop being so aggressive, it's actually dangerous.
And it seems like a lot of Democrats have realized that they've been lied to, because they continuously have been told that they are the party of love. And now they're seeing so much contradicting that they are questioning whether or not everything that they have heard from the Democrats is true, when it seems like most of what they hear is just lies about Trump. He's the worst person and he is a threat to democracy, when actually that is completely false.
I had a really interesting experience. I was at UC Berkeley speaking. I try to speak there once a year to a poli-sci class. And I had a bunch of kids come up to me afterwards there. And again, I'm really encouraged by them. They may be ignorant and wrong on the issues, but they're really smart and they're inquisitive. And one of the things they asked me is, these three young women said, well, we heard that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. We hear this from our professors, our friends, our parents. What do you think about that? And my first response to them was, well, you understand that we don't live in a democracy, right? And they all just stared at me and they didn't know. And I said, we live in a constitutional republic. Have you ever heard that before? And they said, no. I want you to think about this. They're at one of the most prestigious universities in the United States of America. They don't know the difference between a democracy and a constitutional republic. And I had to explain to them that a democracy means mob rule, and it means that we can crush minority rights. Where in a constitutional republic, everybody has representation and minorities are protected. And so what I saw in them was this immediate shift. Like they didn't know that when you give them real information, when you give inquisitive people like these people, you're showing real information, they think, they learn, and they walk away.
Here is a woman who is sharing that the Democrat Party has lost their empathy.
You know, I've lost a lot of friends, and even some family members have unfriended me because of being vocal about my support for Donald Trump after I left the Democratic Party. And a lot of times they want to say that I lack empathy. How dare you? Our morals no longer align. Your empathy has been lost. But after watching last night's speech by Donald Trump and how many Democrats didn't even stand to applaud really any of the victims of the 11-year-old child who battled cancer, I would like to say that the Democratic Party has lost their empathy.
Well, I just think that's, again, it's a conservative perspective because it's just factually true. And I would argue that they haven't lost their empathy, that they've actually never really had empathy. What they put in place of empathy is just something called virtue signaling. In other words, they do it. They say the things they say because it makes them feel good, because they think it makes them look virtuous.
Yeah.
And, you know, this goes back a long ways. And again, I'm older than you. I hate to keep pulling the age card here, but I remember when the Prius was introduced as, you know, the first electric or hybrid vehicle, and people would drive them because it was a way of virtue signaling, showing everybody, oh, I care so much about the environment. And then if I would talk to somebody who drove one, I would say, do you understand that the actual carbon footprint of a Prius is bigger than the carbon footprint of a Hummer? Like the batteries are made overseas. They are mined, all this toxic materials. They have to be shipped on these giant ships. There's no way to dispose of the batteries. So you're actually burning more carbon and putting more carbon into the air than if you drove a Hummer. And they would just stare at you blankly, because what you did is you attacked their sense of well-being that they had created by virtue signaling. So I don't think they've ever been empathetic. I think these are all badges they wear outward facing. It's not about how they feel. It's about how it makes them feel to say these things or do these things.
Yeah. And the frustrating thing about it is it doesn't seem like they're actually accomplishing anything that they want. I mean, they just post these videos complaining, or I don't know if you just saw that the BLM sign just got removed. Like they put things like that out on the street, or there is just so many people that keep protesting, and they just protest for everything, and they just stand outside with signs. And I'm just so confused as to what they are trying to accomplish, or what just saying something is going to do. I mean, I don't see any real change happening.
Yeah, you know, I've been to a lot of these protests over the years, and I like to go to left-wing protests. And the reason I like to go is to talk to people. And I want to find out what they have to say. Like, why are you supporting what you're supporting? What do you know? And what I find is they don't know for the most part. And what they'll do with me, because I'm obviously not one of them, they'll scream at me and call me a Nazi and a fascist. And I'm like, hey, I want to hear you. I'm here to learn. I want to hear you explain your point of view. They can't. It's not just that they won't, it's that they actually can't. Going to the protest is the virtue signal. They tell their friends that went to the protest. They post pictures of themselves at the protest. They pat each other on the back at the protest. It makes them feel good. It doesn't matter whether there's change. It doesn't matter whether they accomplish anything, because what they're accomplishing is just making themselves feel good.
Yeah. And we saw a lot of that during the protests against deportation. People were posing, taking pictures with their Mexican flags and, I mean, burning American flags. And again, I think that it had an opposite effect because it just made people more angry that people were coming here illegally and then, and then not even being proud to be in America and not wanting to leave, though.
You're pointing out something really important, which is the imagery matters a lot. And if you're going to go protest, and I'm not opposed to protesting, I think people should stand up for that which they believe in, but pay attention to what you're saying with how you dress, how you speak, flags you carry. You said something I think is really important. You see people carrying Mexican flags or Palestinian flags or whatever, and they're in the United States of America.
Yeah.
And most people are looking at that and saying, wait, I don't like that. Why are these people carrying Mexican flags in Los Angeles or San Francisco or Denver? They're not in Mexico. And most people say, well, why don't you go back to Mexico then?
Yeah, exactly. All right. So that lady just shared why she is walking away from the Democrat Party. Now we are going to switch gears a little bit. Here is a woman who is speaking about the dismantling of the Department of Education.
Good morning. It's Monday. I have a question for those that have voted for this administration. Did you vote for the Department of Education be taken out? Dismantled? Did you vote for that? I'm just curious. I'm sure you wanted them to change things, but dismantling a department that helps your children and helps a lot of people. Putting it with the states is not the answer, especially if the states don't have income taxes and if they're going to start taking those away too. Like, our children will hurt for this. They want to take away abortion. If you have a baby, you got to take care of it. They don't help you there. Then you take away education support.
Okay, this is an argument that I hear all the time. They say, oh, Republicans, they consider themselves pro-life, but yet since they're for guns, they don't mind somebody going into a middle school or something like that. And I think the best argument that I've heard to that is that pencils misspell words kind of thing.
Yeah, look, there's so much wrong about what she said. I want to start at the very beginning. She said, did you vote for this? And my answer is, oh, yes, I voted for this. I'm all there for this. And in fact, I actually know something about this and she knows nothing. The Department of Education has literally spent hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayer money since it was founded in the 1980s. And we've seen exactly zero increase in test scores or student performance at best. And I say it's flatlined at best. It's actually declined. And so the question is, in what arena could you spend hundreds of billions of dollars and not be punished for that, not be fired by that, not be shut down for that? I've run a lot of businesses. If you waste $2 million, you're going to shut your business down. You're going to go bankrupt. So they've wasted all this money. The other thing is, it is a tiny percentage of what funds schools that comes out of the Department of Education. The vast majority of the Department of Education budget goes to student loans at the college level. What that has caused to happen is when you have hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into anything, the prices go up. So the price of education at university has gone up because there's a glut of money flowing in, and it allows people to go get degrees in things that have no market value. So you can be a lesbian dance major and have your education funded by the federal government, which, by the way, that means you and me, Angela, we're the ones funding that education. Wow. That lesbian dance major is never going to get a job in their field. And maybe then if they could be a professor at the university and start the cycle all over again. So we're just wasting that money. It's insane. And by the way, I know you didn't go to college, by the way. I think that's super smart. Like, I think most of the really smart young people I know now aren't going to college. I'm not against college. If you got to be an engineer, a lawyer, a doctor, or something like, go to college for sure. But there's no such thing generally as a good liberal arts education anymore. And then to go to the argument, she throws out the argument about abortion. This is actually one of my favorite arguments that the left makes about abortion. Well, you won't give us any money to help support it. And they'll say, well, if you are so against abortion, then you should make men pay child support from the moment that a pregnancy is known. And I say, yeah, absolutely. I'm all for that. You should force men to take care of the children their entire lives until they're 18. I'm like, yep, absolutely. I'm totally down with that. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything inconsistent about our positions. She's just ignorant.
Yeah, because then on the flip side of that, you have women who have the child of the husband, but then what say does he have over that child? And that's because it's not about women's rights, it's about that child's life. I mean, the dad also has the right to be a dad to the kid. And it doesn't seem like there are abortion rules. Like if the father wants the kid, it's not like the woman couldn't have an abortion.
No, there's no protections for would-be dads who get into that situation. And you can go out on the internet and you can find hundreds and hundreds of stories of men who begged their girlfriends, begged their wives not to kill their child, and they had no say in the matter. So, yeah, it's completely unjust. It's imbalanced. And I think that the position on the right is entirely morally consistent. And the position on the left, generally speaking, is morally reprehensible. But look, Angela, I want to say this because I think this is important. I understand the position that women want the right to choose. Like, I do get that. I think it's morally incorrect. But I also, as a person who believes in individual freedoms and rights, when you say, well, it's your body and we're going to make you carry this child to the culmination of your pregnancy, that does feel weird to me. But I think you made the right distinction, which is, well, the child has rights. That's a life there. That's not just you.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think that the right is much better at than the left is I understand why people on the left hold the positions they hold, and I can make a good faith argument for them. What they would say about my position on abortion in particular is they would say, well, you just want to control women's bodies. And of course, that's ridiculous. I just want to protect the life of the unborn child.
And the crazy thing is they always bring up I believe it's less than 1% of cases that cause for abortions. But they make that their main argument, even though 99% of the cases are just women who don't want to accept responsibility for their actions. And that's just the truth.
Yeah, you know what? And I'll add in something when they say that. Here's the great counter argument if you're in a discussion with somebody about that. So you're like, okay, I'd be willing to compromise with you. I want to ban all abortion except for in the case of rape and incest. Because you're saying that's the one that you're pointing out to me. So would you be willing to make that deal for me? Like, I'll make the deal with you. If I had the power and could wave the wand, no abortions except for rape and incest, because that's the one you keep bringing up. And they won't go for that. They hate that.
Yeah.
And that proves to you face to face that they're not genuinely making the argument that they claim that they're making.
Yeah. And in my opinion, I guess it sounds so extreme. It's just that human has nothing to do with the way that they were brought into the world, as does nobody. Nobody,
Right.
I mean, we were all just born one day. That's just the way it is.
Well, your argument is the correct moral argument. In other words, to put it in actual debate terms, the argument that they're making is that there should be two victims. That if the woman she's clearly a victim, a baby was conceived who is completely innocent as well, we should create a second victim. And what you're saying and I'm saying is, this is a horrible tragedy, but the miracle of life was created out of it, and that baby should not be an additional victim. And by the way,
Exactly.
I actually know a man he is the founder of a major ministry, has been in this country for a long time. His name's James Robison, and he was a product of rape, and his mom was thinking of aborting him. People talked her out of it. He's gone on to do enormous good in the world. Imagine if his mom had been talked into terminating that pregnancy.
So we just finished talking about women's rights. Now let's shift gears to election integrity. Here's what Trump had to say about it.
Another thing, I just before we leave, I think you should do this. For my safety and security and for the good of our nation, you should do it anyway, regardless, even if it costs 10 times more. But it actually costs you just a tiny fraction. If you went to paper ballots and you're voting, and I would hope that every Republican would. So it costs exactly 8% of what the machines cost. These machines, they got something going. They get business. It's amazing. So paper ballots, and paper is very sophisticated today. It's called watermark. It's impossible to copy, impossible to cheat. It's actually hard to believe that a piece of paper is highly sophisticated.
Is it true that we use the same voting machines that they use in Venezuela?
Yes, it is.
Wow.
Look, this is unbelievable. As a guy that has run tech companies for a very long time, I can tell you with absolute surety that it is impossible to secure an electronic voting system. There are always ways in, there are always ways to manipulate things. One of the things most people don't realize is, any computer runs on source code. There is a set of code that actually runs that voting machine. And one of the things that these voting companies do is they'll never make their source code public because they say that's proprietary, that belongs to them. Well, I get that, but if we can't see the code that's running the machine, then why would we trust the code running the machine? And we shouldn't. And we need to go back to a system of paper ballots. I'll tell you a little anecdote. I was traveling recently and I ran into a woman. I was actually, believe it or not, I was in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and I was at a conference there and I ran into a woman who was a UN election monitor. This was what she did for fun. She'd been doing it for over 20 years. And she's a US citizen who lives overseas, and she comes home for our elections every cycle to monitor our elections for safety, to serve as a judge, and really great lady. We disagreed politically, but this is what she said. She said, the US has one of the most insecure election systems that I see anywhere in the world that I monitor elections. She said, we are worse than most third world countries. And this is the reason, because we use all these electronic systems now. We have drop boxes, we have same-day registration, we have states that refuse to accept voter ID. All of these things make our elections entirely insecure. And all President Trump is saying here is something that's common sense. And by the way, the vast majority of Americans support this is paper ballots, no same-day registration, and voter ID.
So you believe perhaps that this last election was actually too big to rig? Or if the 2020 election was indeed stolen, then why didn't they do it again?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I do think too big to rig is part of it, but I also think the more that people talk about election integrity and election fraud, the more attention people pay to it. So it's easy for criminals to get away with a crime when nobody's looking, and they can do it in the dark. But now you have millions of Americans that are paying attention. I can tell you, like my organization, Convention of States, we put out probably tens of thousands of election judges all over the country who are actually watching what's going down, complaining when they don't like what they see. My son's a lawyer. He did a bunch of legal work. I think he was out in Georgia watching elections and making sure that they're running the way they're supposed to be. So the more people watch, the harder it is to commit the fraud.
I'm pretty sure that I read that at one point you were a part of suing the IRS.
That is true, yes.
It sounds very intimidating.
Yeah, look, it is. The reason we did it is way back when, this goes back about 14 years now, there was a movement called the Tea Party movement in America. And what that was an uprising of conservatives who believed in the Constitution, fiscal responsibility, and free markets. And we were pushing back against big government. And we were very successful in the 2010 election. And there were chapters of what was called the Tea Party Patriots all over the country, over 3,200 chapters all over the country. And the IRS started attacking them and auditing them and refusing to give them nonprofit status. And it was absolutely discriminatory. It was intended to shut down their First Amendment rights. And so ultimately, I helped find a law firm and help get the funding to sue the IRS over this. And the IRS lost. They ultimately settled. It's the only class action lawsuit I've ever heard of them settling. And I see in our next clip, we're going to talk about doing away with the income tax. I'd go one step further. We had to do away with the IRS completely. Look, the country doesn't need the IRS. The framers of the Constitution never anticipated a situation where the federal government would collect taxes directly from the citizens. And the reason they didn't want that is they didn't want us to have a financial relationship with the federal government. They wanted the states to be in between us and the federal government. So the way it was supposed to be is that the states would pay a proportional tax to the federal government, and the states would collect that tax from us. It would be up to the states how to do that. Because what happens is if the federal government can take money out of our pockets, they don't need the states. They can just bypass the states. The states become sort of vassal states of the federal government, and they lose their power. And indeed, that's what's happened.
How possible is it that Trump's tariffs would be able to make it so that there wouldn't be, Americans wouldn't be taxed?
Yeah, I think that's highly unlikely. And I think this is just rhetoric he's using to point out how bad the IRS is and that we need to get rid of the income tax. And I think it's much more likely that if you were to get rid of the income tax, there's a couple ways to do it. One is you could just do it constitutionally by holding an amending convention, which is what I work on every day, is getting to a convention and proposing the repeal of the 16th Amendment, which is what allowed the income tax. Another way to do it is just to change the way that we collect taxes from people. So there are a couple of major tax proposals out there. One is called the fair tax. And the fair tax is a form of income tax, but it's flat. In other words, it just says whether you make $1 million or you make $50,000, you pay 2%, whatever it is. That requires no IRS because you just put on a postcard, I made $100,000, here's my 2%. That's your entire tax return. You don't need an IRS to calculate that. The second way is what's called so that's a flat tax, is a fair tax. And a fair tax is a consumption tax. And what a consumption tax means is instead of having an income tax, you would have higher taxes on everything you bought, higher sales taxes. There would be a federal sales tax on everything. One of the reasons that seems more fair to a lot of people is wealthy people would pay a much higher portion of those taxes because they spend more money. So you could decide if you go out and buy a used car for $20,000, you pay tax on that. If you go out and buy a Ferrari, buy it for $250,000, you're going to pay a lot more tax on that. It kind of creates a graduated income tax based on how much money people make and then how much they spend.
So you brought up a point, and that is that like a lot of Democrats are always screaming about how billionaires need to pay more taxes and that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are in power essentially because they want to give tax cuts to billionaires. What do you have to say about like taxing the rich?
If we were to take and actually confiscate the wealth of every billionaire in the United States of America, I'm not even talking about taxing their income, but you actually took their entire net worth away from them today. Every billionaire in the United States would not operate our government for 1 year on the entire amount of money that they hold right now. So while it might feel good, and this is, you and I talked earlier about virtue signaling, eat the rich, tax the rich, make them pay their fair share. It doesn't solve the budget problem. We don't have a taxation problem. We don't have a lack of revenue problem. We have a spending problem. The other thing is that the wealthy in this country, the top 1%, I believe the numbers, they pay over 30% of all the tax burden in this country. And so the rich are not only paying their fair share, they pay way more than their fair share. And I would add one last thing, which is it is wealthier people in this country, people who start and build businesses that employ everybody in this country. And if you punish them by taxing them, then they will leave. And how do I know this is a fact? That's not just rhetoric. Is look what's going on in California and New York and Illinois and states like this with super high tax and regulatory burdens. They are bleeding population to states like where I live in Texas or in Tennessee or South Carolina that have much lower tax burdens.
Yeah, because ultimately it's the entrepreneurs that are really providing jobs and housing and everything that we get and need comes from business people. And so there's a lot of incentives in our tax world too. Like if you invest in this, then you can get certain tax cuts. And that they do that because the government needs people to be investing in certain industries, right?
Well, the number one incentive, in my opinion, is just lower taxes because that creates more available capital for businesses to invest. I'm not a fan of when the government says, hey, we want people to invest in certain industries because we're going to give them tax credits. I think that's an artificial manipulation of the marketplace. And I'll give you an example. We have all these windmills all over the place. These are highly inefficient. They're environmentally dangerous. They kill literally millions of birds every year. They destroy the environment. They're so giant, we literally have no way to get rid of them when they decommission, and they don't last that long. So they're an environmental blight. They're not efficient. By the way, for every 1 megawatt of power or 1 kilowatt of power that you generate with one of these machines, you have to have a backup gas-fired power plant or nuclear power plant or coal power plant because the wind doesn't always blow. And so they just make no sense. But the government has incentivized with all kinds of government money people to build these wind farms. So they've distorted the energy industry. I don't think government should be subsidizing any industry, frankly.
Oh, okay. So I think that that leads us really well into this whole mess with people destroying Tesla cars, protesting. I mean, just making themselves look like fools. Since we're talking about taxes and all of that, do you like what kinds of conflicts of interest do you believe that Elon Musk has? Or do you believe that he is actually just a patriot who cares about our country so much and is wanting to make things more efficient for everybody?
Yeah, I think he's a patriot. He loves our country. He comes from another country. He came here with virtually nothing, became the richest man on earth. And he knows that happened because he lives in America. And he knows
Yeah.
that there's no other place on earth where that could have happened. And he does not want to see America destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a guy who doesn't need any more money. I mean, most of us can't even imagine the amount of money he has. I don't know, it's like $400 billion now. He might end up being the first trillionaire on earth. He can buy anything he wants, go anywhere he wants, do anything he wants. The guy's literally building rockets to go to Mars. Money is not his prime motivator right now. And I think he said it best recently in a press conference. He said, look, basically, I'm subjected to daily metaphorical proctology exams. I am the most examined guy in the United States of America. It's totally transparent. Everybody knows what my businesses are. Everybody knows what my contracts are. He doesn't have any conflicts of interest because they would be exposed. And look, the left wing would love nothing more than to prove he had an actual conflict of interest. And we haven't actually seen that in the news anywhere. As far as these people who are destroying property like this, they're destroying Tesla, they're attacking Tesla dealerships. This is actually, and I don't mean this to be hyperbolic, this is terrorism. The definition of terrorism are acts of violence that are committed to create fear in people about political issues or so they won't participate in politics. That is precisely what these people are doing intentionally. You're showing all these images. They're setting Tesla charging stations on fire. They're damaging Teslas themselves. They're damaging these dealerships. These people should be, and President Trump has said that they will be charged with domestic terrorism. I saw recently on a Reddit subthread a parent saying, hey, my daughter got caught up in one of these and she vandalized somebody's Tesla at a dealership. And the parents were lamenting, like, what do we do? Most of the advice was get a good lawyer because your daughter's going to jail for a long time. And because she's committed domestic terrorism, she's probably going to go to prison. She's definitely going to lose any scholarship she would have. She's going to be a convicted felon. She's going to have a hard time getting a job.
Goodness.
And that's the way it should be. We should be able to have political discourse, even aggressive, loud, violent, verbally discourse, but not this, not destruction of property, not shutting down cities, not being violent, not threatening other people. Vehement political disagreement is the history of our country. And I believe in free speech unequivocally for that. But when you impede on other people's property rights or freedom of speech rights or their right to be free from violence or threatening behavior, now you've crossed into terrorism. And these pictures you're showing are terrorists.
For sure. And one of the top comments on this post says, I love how MAGA is upset over Tesla, but didn't care about the Capitol. And that seems to be kind of like their argument against, like, for the Black Lives Matter protest. And now this, they're saying, well, what about the Capitol?
Well, so there's what we call whataboutism. But here's what I would say about that. And every conservative that I know always said this. If somebody smashed windows at the Capitol, if somebody destroyed property at the Capitol on January 6th, if somebody assaulted police officers, and we have clear evidence of that stuff, those people should be prosecuted. I have no doubt those people should be prosecuted. The vast majority of people who are there on J6 didn't do that. And by the way, you won't see any pictures like this from the Capitol. Nothing was burned down. There were some windows broken, very minimal property damage. Again, those people should be prosecuted.
Yeah. And I don't know. I've looked into like conspiracies about like January 6th, and I don't know. It seems like some people were going undercover and inciting violence. I mean, the police were throwing gas bombs from behind the crowd and pushing them forward. And there wasn't, who was supposed to be in charge of security, but like didn't do their job that day?
Yeah. So look, Nancy Pelosi has admitted on tape that this was her responsibility and that she failed. I mean, we literally have videotape of her saying this unbelievably. I don't know, I don't want to get out ahead of it. I try not to get out ahead of the conspiracy stuff, but I would
Yeah.
say that the FBI has denied for the longest time that they had assets on the ground, human intelligence assets. It's now come out they absolutely had it. We now know a number. They've been denying they knew a number, even when they said they
Yikes.
might have had some people. They had 26 people on the ground. It appears that out of those 26 people, somewhere between 22 and 24 of them committed illegal activity. So we know that the FBI had a hand in this. I hope at some point, Angela, that we get to the bottom and actually find out exactly what the FBI knew, exactly what Pelosi knew. We know that Trump asked for National Guard reinforcements for that day, for January 6th, and that he was denied those requests. And so something went on that day. It's either incredibly amazing, gross incompetence, or there is some kind of a conspiracy. And I pray that Kash Patel and Pam Bondi get to the bottom of that.
Well, I mean, speaking of getting to the bottom of things, there's so much to get to the bottom too. I mean, there's so many secrets right now, like what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania with the attempted assassination. And then there's the Jeffrey Epstein files and also like all the files, like, and it doesn't seem like they're being released. I don't know. It just constantly seems like we're never getting the full picture. And then by the time we do, everybody forgot about it.
Yeah, I think in a lot of these cases, we're never going to get the full picture, no matter how much they investigate. And here's the reason that I say that. It's not because there's an ongoing cover up, because I do have faith in Kash Patel and Pam Bondi to do their best to get to the bottom of this stuff. Of course, I think President Trump wants to get to the bottom. He wants to know all about what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania. Nobody more than him. But I do believe that a lot of the evidence gets destroyed. And people talk about the Epstein files, and let's presume that all that evidence existed at one point, because I believe it absolutely did. Well, why would they keep it around if they were worried about it being exposed? And,
Yeah.
they knew that as soon as Donald Trump got in, he was going to expose all this stuff. Why would they not have destroyed that evidence? So it's my belief most of that evidence, if not all of it, has been completely destroyed. We might find out by whom and when, but I think most of the evidence on most of these things is gone, long gone.
How do they destroy it?
Look, it depends. If it's digital, then they erased hard drives. They scoured the systems, got rid of emails. If it's paper, they simply incinerate the paper. And you think about how long it's been that the Epstein case has been going on. That's a very long time now. This is not a couple of years. You're looking at maybe a dozen years or more. That stuff could be secreted out of the country by now. It could be incinerated, shredded, buried. I mean, who knows what happened to all the evidence? We know that Hillary Clinton herself destroyed the hard drives in her own computers with a program called Bit and then a hammer. And so if somebody like Hillary Clinton can do that and get away with it, you have to believe that the professionals inside agencies like the NSA and the FBI, they know how to get rid of evidence.
It's so creepy to think about. All right, so here is Tom Homan eating an apple while walking past screaming protesters. It kind of makes me, after I watched that for the first time, I actually ate an apple. I was like, that looks
I
good.
would, yep. I mean, there's one word for that, and that is just based. I mean, that is it. And I love this. I actually think that he stole that from somebody else. A guy running for Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Poilievre, it went completely viral. He was being interviewed by a reporter asking him a bunch of idiotic questions, and he just continued to eat an apple while the reporter was talking to him. It was so obvious that he didn't care, and he had so little respect for the reporter that he was just going to continue munching his apple while he talked to the guy. And that's what Homan looks like. And look, I know Tom personally.
No.
And that guy is just a stud. I'm so impressed by him. This is his second time coming out of retirement. It's costing him an immense amount of money. He had a good private consulting business making lots of money after he had done this the first time when he was ICE director. Now he's the border czar. And I saw him speak literally last week at an event I was at in New York City. And I think the most incredible thing was him telling about and other people talking about why he does what he does. This guy's been up close on the border with the cartels. This is a man who one day opened a semi tractor trailer and found 14 bodies inside of it who had baked to death in the sun, including like a 5-year-old kid. And when he talks about that, he gets choked up and he says, I'm not going to let this happen anymore. He has seen the fentanyl deaths. He has seen the sex trafficking victims. He has seen the child trafficking victims. He's seen things that you and I can only imagine. I can tell you, having hung out with him, and I won't go into the graphic details, but I will tell you, he said, do you want to know what this really looks like? And I said, yeah. And he said, do you have the stomach to watch really graphic videos? And I said, yeah. And he goes, we can't even show these to the public. And he showed me things on his cell phone that are seared into my mind that I can never forget. And he said, I see this kind of stuff all the time. And the fact that the Biden administration is allowing this to happen and facilitating this is one of the most heinous crimes against humanity ever committed. And he has dedicated his life to stopping it. So when he walks by them like this, his life has been threatened by the cartels. His family has been threatened by the cartels.
Wow.
He gets threatened by protesters like this all the time. He doesn't care if they're screaming at him. He's happy to just eat an apple as he walks by.
Yeah. I really like, so you were saying that it has hurt his business in some ways.
Yeah. So look, when he comes out of government, he's a very famous guy who understands how to provide security. He's been a law enforcement officer for over 30 years. So he is a very highly valued security consultant. He's also a highly valued political commentator on a variety of news networks. Everybody wants to have him on. So he had a fairly lucrative business when he came out of government. And then when President Trump got asked him to come back in, it's his family doesn't love it because he's under massive threat.
Yeah.
And he goes from a private sector business that he's running, a security business, and doing all this media that he gets paid for, to having to go back on a government salary. He probably took about an 80% salary cut to go back into the government to do the right thing. And he said, you know what? If Donald Trump could be elected a third time and ask me to come back, I would do it again because it's the right thing to do.
He's fantastic. And he has some of the biggest fans. Everybody loves Tom Homan. And it kind of reminds me, like, similar to Elon Musk, it's not just about the money, because he could be making more money just focusing on his businesses, but he really believes in the mission. Okay, so let me know what you think about this.
Hi, my name is Tempest. And if you don't want me to step on your toes, move your feet.
Are you intimidated? Are you scared?
It's so hard to take that serious. I mean, in so many ways. I look at the blue hair, and again, I will openly admit, when I was her age, I had a blue mohawk. And people used to laugh at me and give me a hard time because I had a blue mohawk. And I thought it was hilarious because I looked ridiculous because I had a blue mohawk. I knew I looked ridiculous. I didn't expect anybody to take me seriously. When people give me a hard time, I would laugh about it because I had a blue mohawk. And she wants us to take her seriously. She's got blue hair. She looks like kind of a frail woman. No, I'm not scared. I don't think she actually means it. I don't think she would step on anybody's toes because I think she would be fearful. This is one of the weird things that social media does for us. It separates us physically from other people.
Yeah.
So we say things, or people like her say things on social media they would never say face to face. She would never walk up to me and say that. I don't think she would walk up to you and say that. She's not some kind of, she's probably some privileged kid from an upper middle class or wealthy family. Nobody's ever laid a hand on her in her life. She wouldn't survive 5 minutes in any kind of physical altercation.
I don't know why. I just feel like there's such a gangsterification of America's youth. And I say that because I kind of was into rap music growing up, or
Right.
I'm a savage kind of thing. And it actually materializes for so many young people that they're actually acting like a rapper, or they have these styles. And it's kind of bizarre because I mean, we live in America. Like, we're so fortunate. Like, we're the wealthiest country. Like, we're all so blessed. We all have running water, running electricity, and we run around like we're, I don't know, a part of the cartel or something. It just,
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to tie it all the way back in. We talked about virtue signaling earlier, and this is a form of virtue signaling, like just the whole look and her trying to act tough, and this is for her friends, and they're all going, "Oh, you're so tough," and she's going to tag all her friends in this, and they're all going to go, "Oh, we're so proud of you, Tempest. You're so tough," and she's never done a tough thing in her entire life, I guarantee you.
But the other like frustrating thing is that before this was something that celebrities could do, that they could build their whole brand around being a savage or being a baddie or whatever. But now that everybody wants to be involved on social media and have influence or be a TikToker or YouTuber, everybody wants to brand themselves too. And so you see them like taking these kinds of roles as well. And it's almost seems like a form of them trying to build a platform or differentiate themselves.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is obviously just an attempt to get attention. Now, look, again, as an older guy who social media wasn't invented when I was young, but I consume a lot of social media now. And a lot of people my age complain about social media. It's so bad. There's so much bad stuff on there. There's a ton of good stuff in social media, right? So your fans watch you and they're going to see a bunch of great content and wholesome, good stuff. And, you know, some of the things that I'm a major dog guy. I love dogs. I love horses. So I follow people who rescue dogs and horses.
Aw.
And these are good people doing good things. And I'm inspired by watching these people. I watch people that go out and do Christian ministry all over the world. And I watch their reporting in social media. And they're doing the exact opposite of what this young woman is doing. So look, this is just a tool, and it's a tool for spreading a message. And I think anytime that you're going to record something for social media for yourself, you need to ask yourself, am I doing good or am I doing bad? Am I putting goodness and love into the world? Or am I putting anger and badness into the world? And she's obviously putting anger and badness into the world. I feel for her. I think we should pray for young people like this to find their way out of that stuff and into more productive things.
Yeah, it kind of helps like to have a guideline to know like what kind of stuff to post.
Well, don't you think, let me ask you a question. Don't you think that most people inherently just know whether I'm doing good or bad?
Yeah.
I think people, if you grew up in a decent family, you kind of know that. Like, she couldn't justify, why is that good? Like, if you really sat down and had an honest conversation with her, she'd probably be embarrassed, is my opinion.
I don't know. She might defend it. She might step on your feet.
That wouldn't work out well for her, I can assure you.
Okay, what do you think of Michelle Obama starting a podcast? And we're going to talk about her relationship with Obama in a second.
So honored to have you, Michelle Obama, at a happy place.
Wow, these Democrats just cannot stop dancing.
Dude, what's with the black garbage bag that she's... That was so bad. That's terrible. What is that? Is that...
True, it's like...
It's a little small on my screen, but it pretty much looks like a hefty bag.
Yeah, maybe she's going with that
blazer.
whole like Trump supporters are garbage. Then everybody started wearing the trash bags, and she kind of...
There you go. I think she's wearing the trash
Yeah.
bag. So, secondly, I don't know what they're singing, but it's bad.
They
And
keep singing.
Michelle Obama with a podcast. Look, this woman said things that I think are unforgivable. I mean, if she were to repent of them, maybe, but she said that she was never proud of the United States of America until her husband was president.
Oh my goodness.
That is just a despicable thing to say. I don't know why anybody would want to listen to her. I don't know why anybody would be influenced by her. And I can only hope that very few people watch that podcast.
I mean, she'll probably collab with Gavin Newsom, but everybody's talking about how Obama is just out of the picture. I don't know if you saw that happy birthday post where they're sitting at like an 8-foot table, like reaching across, like barely reaching each other's like hand. And so some people, I mean, there's also conspiracies about Michelle Obama. Some people say that she's a dude. And some people are also speculating that Obama has left her to be with Jennifer Aniston. What do you, or do you not really care? It's just kind of...
I don't generally follow any of that stuff, but I love it. And I love it just because it's funny.
It's
so
funny,
for me,
yeah.
that is just a funny thing. I'm not like, I know Candace Owens is really into this thing that Michelle Obama is a dude. To me, that's like high comedy. I like that people say stuff like that because I also don't think that people like this deserve to be taken seriously.
Yes.
They behaved in a way that deserves mockery. And so I don't follow it as a serious theory, but I do think it's really funny.
For sure. All right. Now, speaking of people's styles, should white people be allowed to wear braids?
That shit is ugly as f. We wear that shit.
It's braids.
Take that shit out now.
Are you being for real?
Take that shit out now.
Okay, what's your point?
Is this cultural appropriation?
Well, first of all, I watched this video and I just thought, man, I wish that woman with the braids would have smacked the heck out of this other lady. This is just outrageous. What kind of a society do we live in when people think they can just walk up to a random stranger and demand that they change their hairstyle?
I know.
As far as cultural appropriation more broadly, there is no bigger kind of flattery than cultural appropriation. And America is entirely built on cultural appropriation. We call ourselves the melting pot because people bring their fashion here, their music here, their food here, their culture here to the extent, hopefully, that it's compatible with the broader American culture. And we adopt stuff out of those cultures and we create a richer culture out of that. So the idea that we shouldn't, quote unquote, culturally appropriate, I would argue that means we shouldn't have America. And I think that's generally what people like this think.
Yeah. And also, like, it's kind of weird to claim braids. I mean, have they seen women in the UFC? I grew up doing karate, and so we would put our hair in braids all the time. I don't know. This lady's crazy.
Oh, you could look back at Elizabethan paintings in the Victorian era and the Elizabethan era. Women were braiding their hair. Like
Yeah.
now it's just apparently this particular style of braiding cornrows, right? It's only
Yeah.
for black people. And the question is like, how black? Can you be half black
That's a
and
good
have
question.
cornrows? Does your skin have to be a certain percentage of melatonin? You
Yeah,
have
like,
to be a
can you
certain
be
amount of
mixed?
darkness to have corn. Like it's just,
Yeah.
this is just sick. And the thing that makes me most sick about it has nothing to do with the braids. It's that this woman believes that she has the right to do this. And I would argue part of the reason for that, and this is might sound a little bit contrarian, I think we live in a society that's not violent enough. And what I mean by that is if you went back 100 years and somebody treated somebody else like this, they would get punched out. They would, it would just be straight up. You can't get away with that now because you'll get arrested for assault. But when people don't believe that there are any consequences for them doing something terrible like this, then people do terrible things.
My question relates to...
So these people have been stuck up in space. They were only supposed to be there for a week, like 10 days, I believe. And then it was deemed unsafe for them to come back. And now they are saying that Elon Musk made an offer to bring them back and that it was denied.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel for them. I've actually thought a lot about this. I'm a complete space geek. I follow all the space stuff. I love watching Elon launch the rockets and catch them. It's just the coolest thing. And so the fact that these people have been up in space this long, it's horrifying. I mean, I'm trying to think about, they might have kids, spouses. They were supposed to be gone for a week. They've been up there, how long now? Almost a year, I think. I mean, it's just really unbelievable. By the way, there are negative physiological effects from being in space that long. Their muscles are wasting away to some extent. It's changing their human physiology. And so it's a really bad thing. If Elon did make that offer, which he says he did, and it was turned down during the Biden administration, that's just outrageous. It was probably turned down because the Biden administration hated Elon Musk because he had turned towards the right and they didn't want him to be elevated for this. That means we're putting politics over lives once again, but that's something the left does regularly. I think that's kind of a theme throughout this entire program we've been talking about.
For sure.
If you're a common sense person, if you love other people, if you believe in freedom, if you believe in meritocracy, you're going to end up being red pilled if you're on the left, and you're going to end up on the right. You're going to end up watching Angela's podcast is what's going to happen to you.
Make sure that you guys follow Mark Meckler on X and go to his website, conventionofstates.com. Thank you so much for being here, Mark. I really appreciated your insight.
Thanks. Let's do it again soon.
Sounds good. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.